like to say the prayer this evening?
My pleasure. Loving God, as we come together tonight for the city of Waterville, we pause to ask you to be with us and guide our way. May your spirit of peace surround all we say and do this evening. We ask for your strength to do what is best for the good of Waterville. Lord God, as servants of your people, we pray that you grant us a share of your wisdom. Amen.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mayor Brody?
Here.
Mr. Rosick?
Here.
Mr. Pedro?
Here.
Mrs. Duncan?
Here. Thank you. Next, we have our approval of minutes from our regular council meeting on September 10th, 2018, and we would need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any changes, corrections, or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have citizens' comments. Do I have any citizens out there? No. Seeing none, we'll move on to a presentation, which we have for the Public Square, Parker Square Memorial Park Master Plan, and Mr. Phil Enderly is here to share some info with us.
Okay, all right, sounds great.
Thanks.
Am I on? I'm assuming.
You're on.
Okay,
I think
sounds
you're
great.
on.
Can you all right, you can hear me?
I
All
can
right.
hear you.
Well,
Is the
first
green
of
light
all-
on your,
It's green.
okay, then you're on.
Then you're on.
Okay, thank you. Before sharing with you the master plan, first of all, for those who have seen this probably 5 or 6 times, I apologize. You're going to be seeing a lot of the same things again, but this is an important process. I think what makes it so exciting of a process is that this is a process that was not done behind closed doors. It was a very transparent process. In fact, it was very well orchestrated and very well publicized over 18 months of the planning process. The master plan committee itself, we met over 8 times, and our committee is made up of 8 individuals, plus at every one of our meetings, which was a public meeting, we'd have 6, 7, maybe as 8 other guests attend. So it was a project that was very dear to a lot of people's hearts. We did have a public open house meeting where we had 25 to 30 people attend. It was a great attendance. And then, of course, then we met with the Plan Commission, the Parks and Recreation, the Waterville Historic Commission. When you add up all the hours, because our committee, our master plan committee, was made up 100% of volunteers. Now, there was a technical committee, and I'll get into that a little bit. But as far as our volunteers, we logged in well over 300 hours of volunteer time. So again, it was a great committee. A lot of people really put a lot of hard work forward. Just to get everyone's point of reference, obviously here's River Road. The black line that you see represents the property that the city currently owns, and then this is the 19 School Place property. This is the existing bridge, and then this is the proposed alignment for the new bridge. Here's Farnsworth right here. Just as we kept needing to remind ourselves throughout the master planning process that this is a master plan. We're at the 30,000 foot level. So there's a lot of details that still need to be worked out, but it's the vision that we're trying to create here. This is just a slide that we kept on reminding ourselves that we're not trying to dictate exactly how this park is going to look like, but we are providing a good roadmap, a good vision. So it's all about many possibilities, and it's about possibilities, not promises, and being also a little frugal, being smart with how we spend or plan the money as well. So this was our planning committee. So as I mentioned, we met 8 times, and we kind of refer to this committee kind of as the dreamers. We were the committee that was kind of doing a lot of the brainstorming. But then we also had the technical committee, like Ed Glowacki, who's an architect, and Tom Uresta, who is the city's civil engineer. They were there keeping our feet rooted in reality. And then obviously, council, you will ultimately have the final say in the drawing or in the master plan. but then also, again, a lot of key constituents that were part of the planning process. As I mentioned, it was an 18-month planning process. We started way back in March of 2017. The circles that you see represent the times that we've met. There was actually another meeting that we had in June of this year. We went through this kind of 3-stage process, and then when we presented the master plan at the public meeting, that's where we had the 25 to 30 people attend. It was very well received. In fact, any time that we presented this to the public or to a commission, it's been very well received. Just some overarching guidelines for the master plan. There was always a vision of reconnecting to the river, both visually and physically. And in our downtown master plan, it talks about, we've got, the city, or the word of water is in our name, but you can't even see the water, so we really need to reconnect it. And really begin to celebrate the view and frame the view, so when you're coming down Farnsworth, there really is this sense of excitement and celebration, and kind of really going back to our roots. And speaking of roots, just a lot of history with this site, so we'll talk about that. And we also understand that we don't own, there are some key properties that we don't own, and we needed to understand that this plan needs to work with or without these 2 properties. And then a big one was really maintaining the original public square, which was located right here where the school was. And then, so looking back at where the original public square was, so this was Waterville back in 1840. What you see in the yellow squares represents existing houses that were at that time. And then this dash line represents River Road, or not River Road, but the trail, or what would ultimately become the canal. But way back then, there was this public square, and it was right at the end of Farnsworth, which is interesting. Farnsworth was actually called Wood, but here is Mechanic Street, and actually there was the bridge right at the foot of Farnsworth, or right at the corner of or at the edge of the public square. And so you kind of think about, well, where did this idea of a public square, and when you visit a lot of Ohio historic towns, they all have a public square. And where does this idea come from? Well, actually, it comes from Europe. And no surprise, a lot of our landscapes in early history were greatly influenced by Europe. And for example, this is a French square where a lot of activity, this is where businesses and where proposals, where basically where life was. These were the lifeblood of the community where people would come out. And so that spirit of just community really carried over the Atlantic Ocean into the New World. And so this was a painting of a Northwest Ohio or Northwest community that was dated back to 1839, basically the same time as the map, and here's a public square. And again, you see, the buildings are not quite so tall. Maybe instead of a government, like in this case, this was usually like a parliament or a form of government, so they could collect their taxes and for any exchanges. Here we have the church, which was really kind of the centerpiece of many of our communities. And so with that, then here's our public square today. And we are really blessed that we still have so much of that original framework that defined the public square. So with that kind of idea, that we really wanted to maintain the public square, we began to also think about, but what else? What else is there going to be to attract people to the park? So we came up with this long list. Well, in fact, at one of our meetings, we did a visioning session. And we literally came up with over 30 ideas. Everything from chimney swift towers to benches that would overlook the Maumee River. And just, a carillon. Again, a lot of ideas. And we recognized that we couldn't do all of them. So we kind of came up with an A list and a B list and then a C list. And so with those ideas, so we kind of came up with that list, but we also needed to recognize that, again, there was a lot of historical significance with this site. We've got the cannon, which dates well over 100 years old, and who knows when it was actually put here, but in this photograph of the 1913 flood, It was actually sitting right here in this photograph that was taken before the school was demolished. And we still have the cannon. And the idea is that we would incorporate that into the plan. There were a number of architectural artifacts that were saved from the school. So those have been preserved and would be incorporated. And then another artifact that was just recently discovered this summer were actually pieces of the original 1888 bridge that were uncovered right along River Road. And so the thought is that if we could incorporate those into the design itself, and it was actually the collapse of the 1880 bridge that really led to the bridge that we are currently replacing today. There are a number of memorials that we need to be respectful to as well. As I mentioned earlier, this park is very dear to a lot of people in the community. And so even though now the master plan does not physically locate where some of these memorials are going to go, but ultimately the plan will be to relocate these somewhere in the park. But we just felt that, first of all, we're trying to keep the dialogue at the 30,000 foot level. And who knows, once the park is completed, people may feel that instead of putting it right along the river, maybe there's another area in the park that they'd like to put, a bench or something. So with all of that background, I'm going to walk you then through the master plan. So we kind of rotated the plan a little bit. So here's River Road, Farnsworth, the Maumee River's down here. Again, what you see in black represents the property that the city owns. So as far as some of the goals, is that so this is the original public square that showed up in that 1840 map. So we said, okay, we need to preserve that. And then we've got the Maumee River, and this is the 100-year flood. And obviously, the Maumee River is a very dynamic element in the landscape. It fluctuates. And so we really need to be careful that we didn't want to plan on anything in this area that could eventually or potentially wash away. So we really needed to keep up here. There was also a number of large trees, native trees, that we wanted to keep. We wanted to get rid of the invasives, but we wanted to keep the native trees. But then there was this idea that, but we need to draw people to the water. And how do we do that? So we said, well, we need to kind of create the focal point or an overlook for people to enjoy that would, kind of be like right on center line of the public square. It would be like this invitation to people to come in and really enjoy the view of the Maumee River. But we also wanted to recognize, to create like a gateway or a welcoming mat right here as people come down Farnsworth. So at the intersection of River Road and Farnsworth, there's kind of this gateway that, again, that would bring people into the park and welcome them into the park. And then we said, okay, well, this is beginning to feel really good. What about, even though this was not a public square, could we kind of create something similar on this side as far as just kind of this open space? Now, the other thing that we struggled a lot with early on, that on most park master plans, you do not want a road going right through the center of your park. You want them on the perimeter. But in this case, since School Place was already there, and we already had, this turnaround, we said, you know what, it seems to work. Let's just, instead of fighting the grain, let's just work with the grain. So we said, let's just go ahead and keep, as far as vehicular circulation, let's just keep that open. And then, but we also said, we've got this new kind of gateway right here. We need to provide some kind of like a pedestrian connection that would lead into the park from that corner. So with that, this is the proposed plan for the park. And there is a lot of information to go over, so I'm going to kind of go over it with you. But just to help you, the colors that you see, the numbers that you see in blue represent what we refer to as the A list. So these were we kind of considered as our top priorities. And then the yellow numbers, which we kind of refer to as the B list, which are kind of the second tier as far as the priorities. So I'm going to walk you through with the A list first. So first of all, what you see is the number one is what we're calling it the Parker Square, and again, in honor of the Parker family. So the idea is that this would really literally be this open lawn that could be programmed for events, whatever. Again, very similar to what the public square probably did, 200 years ago. And then to kind of welcome everyone to the park, we've got this plaza, and these circles that you see represent like flagpoles. And then the red crescent represents a low brick wall where we would be using bricks that were salvaged from the elementary school. And we'd also be incorporating some of those other architectural artifacts. And then the 3 right here, and that's the cannon. And that's actually the cannon, its location in that 1813 photograph. So we really wanted to put it back in that original location. And then on each corner of the square, these are our chimney swift towers, which again they kind of define the edge of the park, and again kind of welcoming people. And then really completing the square, these would be swings, these very large swings. The Toledo Metro Parks have some of them. That you get, again, it kind of helps to define the 4 corners of the actual square. And then there's a sidewalk that would then lead people down to what we refer to here as this overlook. And what you see is these lines. These are actually stairs that would carry people down closer to the water's edge. But this overlook could maybe be 6 or 7 feet above the existing kind of the water's edge here. It would be at the same elevation as the square, so as you're looking across the lawn, this area would actually be at the same elevation as the lawn. So the idea is that you could actually see some of the water's edge as you begin to approach this space. But we really wanted to create something that would draw people, again, to the water's edge. And if they're enticed to want to go down, we obviously provide that opportunity with the stairs as well. And we've also incorporated in the yellow maybe some bioretention swales. And then we are also looking at maintaining some parking. Not a lot, because there already is some existing parking along River Road, but we thought we do need to maintain some parking. And then a boat launch here again, and then the sidewalk that would actually tie in to the proposed pathway. I'll call it a path, but the landing or the plateau that ODOT will actually be putting in. The idea is that we would then pave that and then bring it up to Mechanic Street. And then also providing, again, the idea that this would be a destination not only for people in cars, automobiles, or walking, or bikes, but also for anyone kayaking, canoeing, that they could then lock up their kayak or canoe in some storage. So that's kind of the A list. And then this is maybe a view of what maybe this wall could potentially be. Again, there's a lot of planning that still needs to go on. And then if you were standing in this area right here, again, what that view could look like. It really is a beautiful view. And especially this photograph was taken after a lot of the invasives were removed. And so it really began to open up the view. So we think it could really be a really spectacular experience. And then as far as the B list, we really wanted to kind of focus a little bit more on maybe some entertainment and also some just family-friendly resources. So the thought is that if we could create like a public restroom building with a carillon, maybe it's a concession stand that'd be located right here, with a plaza that could be, again, programmed for a lot of different events. But we also wanted to create like a water feature in here, but a water feature that doesn't look like a water feature when it's turned off. So what you see, these funny shapes, maybe they're big boulders that when there's no fountain, they're just boulders, places where people can sit if they want to just sit there and enjoy the view, or if there's a concert going on in here, if they want to sit up here, or maybe they bring lawn chairs. But the idea is that when it is a fountain, then maybe you push a button and there's water that comes out of the rocks or whatever. But the idea is that it really be an interactive type of water feature. And then this is the sidewalk that would then connect from the intersection of Mechanic and River Road. And then the idea of that create maybe like a promenade walk that would actually bring people. So right here, the thought is that maybe this is a breezeway, that as you're coming down this sidewalk, that you'd actually be looking right towards the river. So then we kind of we said, okay, if that's the grand vision, what's maybe a phase 1? And so this is what we kind of came up with a potential phase 1. So again, this assumes that the school place property is not acquired, nor is the River Road property. Because we said, yes, while it'd be wonderful to be able to own those, we said, well, we need to be, again, pragmatic and assume that we're not going to get those, at least maybe not in the early phases. Well, what all could we do? So essentially the thought is that we're going to be able to do pretty much everything, or the recommendation is to try to do as much on the A list as we can. Now, instead of building new parking, we said, let's just keep the existing parking as it is. I mean, it works fine, it functions fine, let's just leave it. But let's go ahead and maybe do some upgrades and go ahead and add the canoe launch at this point. Now, there is, as I mentioned, there's a lot of detail that still needs to be worked out. Some of it is site lighting, and we talked a lot about this, is that, you know, with this being an urban park, and right now the policy is that, you know, parks are open from dawn to dusk. And with it being an urban park, is this an opportunity to actually incorporate some creative lighting so that when people come to Waterville for dinner or for entertainment, let's take a stroll after dinner down to the park. Because it is, and so we said if we could do maybe, again, there's some really wonderful LED lights and technology out there that can really make the place spectacular. But anyway, I guess I'm going to kind of pause there and see if there's any questions.
Can I talk? Is there a railing on this
Oh, there sure would be. Yes, there would. Yes, in fact, thank you for bringing that up, because the one thing we even talked about is having this railing match the railing that's on the bridge. So this way it kind of ties the park and the bridge together. So, yep. But the idea that you would be able to see through it.
Was there an area in the park at one point designed or still designed that someone could purchase a brick, maybe like in honor of someone?
You know, we did talk a little bit about, you know, maybe fundraising. We didn't get into the details. We said, you know, maybe this is a potential location or this is a potential location. But we said instead of dictating that now, we said let's just kind of put that on hold. But obviously that could be worked into as well.
Not to be confused with all the bricks that we saved, or it could be the same program, but we did save quite a few bricks from the old school. So
Yeah.
I think they're at Public Works.
Yes.
Stored. So I have a quick question. So when you're looking at it on the right-hand side where the bridge will be, so right now it shows trees and whatnot. How
Yeah.
much, on the previous slide where you had the actual squares on the actual map as it is now, is there enough room there if things had to change in orientation, like which way they're going now, based on any changes that might happen on that side? Is there enough room, or where those trees are located, would that not be a good spot? Do we have to have so many feet away from, do you see what I'm asking?
So the ODOT, so
Because
this
the other
is,
house was right there, yeah.
yeah, so this line right here represents the public right-of-way.
Oh, that's
So
pretty
ODOT, so the embankment is actually, knowing ODOT, I mean, I'm
It's
sure.
gonna be a huge embankment.
This is going to be a huge embankment all along this area.
Is that
And
bigger
Jim,
than
would
normal?
you-
That right
Would
away?
you agree?
Well, it goes to the toe of the slope of the embankment, so it's really just a function of how tall the embankment is there.
So it's really not usable space.
No,
Not really.
not
That's
really.
a bummer, that's quite a
No.
bit.
You know, I have a question, it just occurred to me on this presentation. So 30 North River Road, the one next to the tobacco house, is losing its rear access. It's already lost the River Road parking. I mean, they can do some parallel there, but they had quite a few parking spots beforehand. They lost those, and now they won't have
Are
any.
you talking about the alley back to the house?
They
that's
currently
talking
have
about-
an alley, if
They
you go back to
do.
the aerial picture originally.
Yeah,
So what are we gonna do about that?
Well, they have access in the front, right?
Yes.
Yeah, as long as they have
Public
access.
parking is never guaranteed for private residences. They have their driveway.
Was the alley not
Well, they don't have, I
private?
mean, they used to have an alley.
But the
and
alley
then,
wasn't theirs.
You know, ODOT cut
No.
that off, coming off of, Mechanic over the bridge. And now with the park, we're cutting off the alley completely. I'm just wondering
They
if
have a
there's any
driveway, don't they?
legalities in
They
that.
have a driveway in the
Driveway
front.
and they have
No,
a
they
street.
do not have a driveway.
That's all most people get.
No, they don't.
They don't
Next
either?
door does. The tobacco house has a driveway,
Oh, okay.
but 30 North does not.
That's not.
So I don't know if legally we can cut them off like that.
We can do it.
Ethically,
We can do it.
morally.
We can do
Where,
it.
are they parking in a back driveway or an alley?
Oh, yeah,
Were they parking in an alley?
No, they park in their backyard, you
In
know.
the yard?
Well, it's like a driveway that
Okay.
they've put in for their.
Because I think an
their
alley
house.
would be different than a driveway.
Well, based on conversations I had with her, her intention is to sell the house anyway and move on, so.
Well, just for the point of discussion and consideration, I think
Yeah.
we need to.
That is
Keep it in
something,
mind.
yeah, keep that
To
in
think
mind.
about, right?
Yep, yep.
Well, because
Yeah.
we have to accommodate for the Valentin property, you know,
Mhm.
so we have to keep that roadway in
Yeah, I
for
remember
their
that.
property. And I know that that's their only access, but.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, so you're saying there's the access right here
Mhm.
to their
Where
back.
the
It's gonna be
house is.
abandoned, right, the alley?
Something to consider.
Okay,
from the
yes, it
road.
is.
The B list, the restroom and the entertainment circle is on the B list,
Mhm.
which of course is right on top of the house that's there.
Yes.
So if that never comes to pass, would you find another location for restroom and
I think-
entertainment?
Yeah, knowing the committee, I'm sure we would, I think everyone understood the need for having a restroom there or somewhere here. Even though there is, there's the clock tower and the restrooms, just not that far, but we thought to accommodate people, that may be using the Molly River, I think we'd have to take another look at that.
Yeah, one of the thoughts was down there where the two red buildings are, again, if it doesn't go up there, down by the river where your kayakers are going to be and other activities is a logical
Yeah.
spot if we don't get what we'd like out of the gun.
That's why I'm saying if you had to get back together and the orientation was different or one of the properties, there's still usable space there. We just probably have to have a second look. So as
Yeah,
we
we
decide
would.
whether to adopt this, we might have to have a few caveats
Yeah,
on
I mean, there's,
future
there
planning for this
there is
side.
there's still a lot of property here. that we
That's what
could
I'm
try
saying. I
to-
think there's room for things, but
Yeah.
they would look a bit different than this
They
plan.
would,
Yeah.
yeah, they would look a little different.
And I think in the prioritization of the different elements, the left-hand side is a higher priority, and depending on funding, it'll probably be a number of years before we get to some of those major items on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Sure.
Phil,
Very good.
Yeah,
just
please.
a comment and a question. Great presentation by you and your
Thank
team.
you, thank you.
Those that worked on it, a lot of thought I can tell went into it. So maybe just two questions. Is there one thing that maybe you didn't talk about yet that the committee flushed it out that you just left off the table, or is there something that the committee still might want to bring back? You mentioned kayak. Is there a winter type activity that might come into play? Just a thought if you guys had some of those conversations.
I mean, there's talks about, having a bonfire down there. Little concerns about that. I'm trying to think I can't think of anything that was discussed that.
Other than the plunge in January, that was about it.
Yeah.
Again, water is a wonderful thing, but it's also a liability, so.
Yeah.
I think it's great, and kudos to the committee.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. It was a fun process.
Maybe you mentioned 30,000 foot. I'm gonna go 40,000. Okay? What is there some? It goes. Councilman Bruno comment a little bit. I mean, I know I'm going back to the ground, but is there other organizations? You had the Metro Parks, and you had the Historical Society. Is there any other groups that could be engaged in this going down the home stretch? Is there a national or historical kayak association that would want to be there? Is there anything else like that?
That's a good question.
Well, again, that is in the later phases that are just very, very 30,000 to 40,000 feet.
40. I'm at 40.
The focus is on that which we're going to go first. The rest of it is conceptual, subject to change based on circumstances. So nobody that we have not thought of jumped out of the woodwork or expressed interest.
That's great, so thank you.
Good job, Phil.
Thank
As
you.
always.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we adopt it, is that the end of it, Phil? Like, we talked about some numbers and some, is that just our conceptual plan tonight?
I mean, I have numbers.
But
if
this is
that's
the last slide you had was pretty
I
much
mean-
for council. Okay,
Correct.
okay.
We're not gonna get into the numbers until
Well,
we're
I
a lot
think-
closer to dealing with
Well, I
what
think-
we're dealing with.
I think with a comp plan, though, I kind of disagree. We do have a donation. They'll be done with the bridge under 2 years. The left side, the first priority is actually something you can put probably some easier numbers to because it's not as many structures.
Correct.
I do think the council, like, we're not gonna take 5 years to do a green space, which a lot of that side is. I mean, obviously, there'll be a cost in planning and whatnot, and that's not inexpensive. But we do have a donation on the table that someone has given our town. We do have ideas on that side. I do think we're not probably gonna wait, that's why it's in phases for both sides. Maybe I misspeak, but I do think that needs to somehow be in anything we adopt.
Okay.
Somewhat, some more of those details. I mean, a little bit.
Okay.
Not, this is the actual tree that we're going to buy, or this is the actual, whatever. But here's my concern, councils change, administrators change, people change, who come in and out of here. And we do comp plans for our city. I've done a couple of those. I've been around for a couple. This is pretty important. We actually already have some commitments. The Rotary's interested, a couple other people. There is a side that we can work on. The bridge will be done probably before 2020. That's the date, but it could be before then. They'll get that land back to us. We're already almost to 2019. Okay, so that's why we did this
Yeah.
so soon.
Yeah.
I would ask council that we not adopt tonight, but we maybe see if we could put a little more detail in there, not going to 10,000 feet, not picking out anything, but I think we're gonna probably agree on the left-hand side, first priority, that we agree that's a pretty nice, passive, respectful town square park. And there are actually some things we can bank on there. And I already know with all the projects we've done while I've been on council, that you can put some cost to a park like that. It reminds me of our bear park, and
Right.
I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Right.
And we're not gonna lock anybody in, but I feel like the future people up here making decisions might need a little more to go on.
We do
So-
have all the numbers with
We-
inflation projections
we do.
for.
And I know we did that within the committee. I guess what I'm saying to
Yeah.
council, if I were you, I would, before I put my name on something kind of generic, I would want some details in there. Does that make sense, or does anybody have any
Yeah, just,
feedback?
I guess for clarification, I didn't think we were at the point where we would actually adopt something tonight.
Well, it
Is that-
did say we could in there, so that's why I'm throwing this out for you guys. We
No,
said we could possibly.
We do have the numbers, and I think
We
we could
do.
incorporate those in
Yeah.
the plan, and it's correct that it was not intended that there would be any kind of adoption
Yeah.
tonight. The idea would be if council's comfortable, we would have a resolution on the agenda to formally adopt the plan at a future meeting.
But I
So we weren't
think-
prepared at all tonight
right.
to do that.
Is
But
it
I
more-
think
is
we're
there-
not even ready for the next step because we have to advise you to include that tonight. So we do need to have that discussion. And then if we're gonna come back in the future, we need to add. And I am not talking about a budget that anybody can stick to because of timing and,
Okay.
but I do think my comments for a passive park are pretty, you're in landscape.
Sure, sure.
We know what a lot of that cost will be.
I mean, we do have those numbers. I mean,
Yeah.
I can put
You
them
don't need
up
to do-
if that's,
We could just put them in our next
yeah,
council.
no, we,
Oh, he's got
we-
'em.
I
Okay.
got them, I got them. Go ahead and.
But I just think council needs to think about that so we can direct the
Okay.
staff what we wanna come back and look at,
Okay.
so.
So
and
this was an estimate that actually our technical committee, like
Right.
Ed and Tom put together. So this is kind of what I gotta stand back so I
I think
can
you got
see
kind
it.
of
So this is our A list. So if you remember all the blue dots, blue circles, and this is the graphic that goes with this cost. So obviously everyone's eye is going right down here. Now, this is only construction. It does not include what I would call soft costs, like professional fees, to get a survey, to hire an engineer, an architect. Maybe there's some other furniture that we want to get. But what the way this is, so these are like the items that we try to identify. This is the quantity, what it is. Like for example, this shared use path that actually goes through Parker Square. There's 650 feet of it. It's $21 a foot, so you're looking at this price right here. So what you do is you take the quantity times the unit price to get with the total. Now, some of these are more lump sum, just because it was, like for example, some of the clearing of the embankment, the steps and the hand railing along here, and we've included a little bit of lighting, like there's some in-wall lighting along the overlook, some trees, the porch swings, that we talked about in these locations, the flagpole, maybe the concrete, at the brick wall, which would be right in this area here, the low brick wall, the chimney swift towers. So we've tried to identify everything that we could at the 30,000 foot level. So yeah, you're looking at a fairly significant price for this first phase. Yes.
With the what they call it, metal porch bench swings, just an idea that I'm thinking, if you were to be able to put a plaque on that with something dedicated to someone, I think that you could probably get a $500 donation for that.
Yeah,
which
I
would
mean,
cut the cost down a little bit.
we absolutely agree. We absolutely agree. And that was one of the reasons why there's a lot of memorials down in this area. Instead of us dictating where those memorials would want to go, maybe the family says, you know what, we're going to take that plaque and we're going to place it on on one of these swings. We have no idea, but yes, to answer your question, absolutely. Does this help?
That does help. And Jim and I had discussed it, and we thought, I think you got interrupted because you stopped in the middle and we asked a lot of questions, but we kind of wanted council to have something like that, because if you are adopting something, these are subject, people need to understand these are very subject to change.
Absolutely.
Two chimney swifts are, for example, $20,000, 23, and there are different things you can do to change these costs and still have a fantastic looking park, but
Absolutely.
But you do have to start somewhere. So it was tough for us to ask this of the technical committee, but they did a nice job. But I will promise you that number will probably be really different. I don't think it will be more. I think it'll be the other way. But if it had to be, you can work within it. But I do think you need a structure, because you've got to, that list and the A list may have to be prioritized to do that in phases.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I guess that's what I want council to understand, and that's what Jim and I discussed. So
Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor.
go ahead.
I interrupted.
No?
Is the committee done as far as phase one is concerned, or is there more planning to be
I think the committee feels, once, I know it's a good question. Everyone on the committee kind of jumped on board, but we never asked, defined, well, when are we finished? So I think we're finished.
No, actually,
I
at the
think-
June meeting, we said that would be the last meeting.
That would be the
and
last
the
meeting, yeah.
We
Committee
might call on
adjourned.
them again. Yeah.
Cena DA, is that?
Great. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually. But it's a concept.
should know that.
To answer Mr. Rosick's question, though, we're the concept, more the top view ideas.
Yeah.
Any of those subject to change, but within the confines of if council likes that layout and plan. And obviously to do phase two, that throws a whole nother set of challenges and
It sure
cost
does.
in there. But
Sure does.
I think it gives you a beginning for the actual original piece before the bridge was going to come into town. That was actually the only piece we were going to be able to do. So we still think we should think about that, and just before council brings it back, we should think about including some of these so we understand, and then the council will have to decide when ODOT returns the land back, what order. There will be somewhat of an order you'd have to do it in, but how much you can do and when, and what you're going to put in the budget, and the donation, the generous donations, and on and on and on. But those questions will come later, like Mr. Bruno referred to too. But I think you ought to put down a target. That's my opinion, and then we can see.
Do you have the same schedule for the B list?
We do not. We do not. We figured, let's just kind of focus on the A list right now, because this area, there's just a lot of moving parts, and so it's really difficult to kind of put that to.
And this does not take into account the donation,
It does not.
Okay.
No.
No.
because that was what, 150? $150,000
Yes.
donation, so that would come off of that. And then I guess another thing we should discuss then before adoption would be the naming, because there's gonna be like different portions of it, right? Because there's been a rumor, of course, we all know that down at the river where the boats come in and out, Waterville Gas donated that property and it became Memorial Park, right? And that's where everybody was donating those memorial pieces. So rumor has it that, did we talk about that? Are we gonna keep Memorial Park down there and then we're gonna have Parker Square up there and then is the whole park gonna have a name?
No, that's a good question, because, and we've always said Parker Square and Memorial Park master plan, because we as a committee, I'm not sure.
That will be a
we-
council decision,
I was gonna say,
think.
we
Yeah.
really couldn't make that.
Which would be
decision.
okay to put the name of the park in or multiple names into we talked about the square being the Parker Square.
Yes.
So, right, Barb, you're correct.
Yeah,
it
so
could
this would be Parker Square, and
Yeah.
maybe potentially this is Memorial Park. Or is it Parker Square in Memorial Park?
Exactly.
Ah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Is
So
the-
many decisions.
Is the donation subject to naming? Okay.
Yes.
That
Okay.
portion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Naming rights. And I guess then my final question would be then, not that the committee has disbanded per se, but then will this come under the purview of the Parks and Recreation Committee?
It
As
should.
we-
I'm
It
sure
should.
it should.
That would be the
Yeah.
direction of it, okay.
Yeah.
In the council, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the committee will be involved when the final plans are, am I
I'm
right
not,
about that?
not
or-
necessarily. I
No.
think
No.
this committee, they were charged with coming up with the vision.
With an idea.
And
Just an
they've
ad
come up
hoc
with the
committee for the
vision.
purpose of this master plan.
So,
Very nice. Get the
Yeah.
discussion
I mean, it's-
done and get it moving.
Not criticizing the plan at all, believe that,
No.
it's wonderful, it's terrific,
Yeah.
but,
Sorry, John, this will be up to council now. Hopefully Phil is not moving or
If we
anything.
need another
but-
committee to do more work,
Okay.
put together another committee.
Yeah. Any other questions? I think that was it, once we
Okay.
get the numbers included, I think.
Okay.
But
Great.
all right.
I would say, we could bring a resolution or something to look at next time and see how
think that's
council
the
feels. We
plan.
don't have to
Yep.
vote next time on it, but,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank
Phil,
you.
just
Thank
wanna
you.
thank you and the committee and for
Thank
presenting
you.
it 5 times or so.
Well, and for listening.
You did
by
a
me.
fantastic job, and we
Thank you.
appreciate you leading a lot of that design, for sure. It looks great.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. Next, we have our staff reports, and Mr. Bagdonis.
Thank you, Mayor. Council has a copy of my report, and I would just mention regarding the Union Cemetery District, I did attend a meeting of the White House Village Council, and as we discussed at our last meeting, the possibility of a joint meeting of the elected officials from White House, Waterville Township, and the city of Waterville. And we're still trying to pin down the date. October 23rd looks like the most likely one. We're still waiting to hear back from the Waterville Township trustees. When the meeting occurs, it'll be at the White House Village Hall. So as soon as we firm the date up, we will let you know, and that will be a public meeting of all 3 bodies. End of my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bagdonis? All right, seeing none, Law Director, Mr. Dombey.
No report tonight, Your Honor.
Thank you. Our Finance Director, Mr. Gokenhour.
Evening. Council has a copy of my report, which is the month-end report for August 2018. We ended the month of August with an ending balance of $6,747,947. We had investment income at the end of August of approximately $32,525. Also enclosed are our reader reports for August and September. August collection was approximately $239,198. which was quite a bit less than we collected last year, about $56,000 less than we collected last year. September's collection was $202,810, which again was less than we collected in September of 2017. I mentioned this at the last meeting, you know, to pin down why the income tax collection was down in August and September. I guess it's up, you know, could be a number of different things. I guess historically, September hasn't been the strongest month of income tax collection in recent years, and the way RETA sets up their payments, September, we tend to miss the estimated tax payments for individuals and businesses in September, so we should see those in October. So I guess I would expect that October would be much better than September. Other than that, that's my report for this evening.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Gokenauer? Thank you. Next, we have our treasurer, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I will forewarn you, this is probably the most you will see me up here all year. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but and the stuff I talk about isn't as fun as talking about a park, but it's still very important stuff. So anyway, I just have a couple things that I need to go over with everybody tonight. First of all, the monthly treasurer's report, which you have for the month of August. About all I will say on that is all our balances are the highest, for the most part, they've been in the last 2 years. So I don't know if there's a lot else I need to say about August. Right now, our financials are looking pretty strong. Now, we've got some capital improvement projects that we'll be paying as we go here, so those will start going down. But we're really in pretty good shape right now, you know, through August. I also have in here the review of the 2017 audited financial statements. So it's about 80 pages. I'm sure you've all read it already. It's all right here. If you haven't, I have an extra copy that you are welcome to take a look at. But what I try to do is, for those of you who've been on council for a while, is I try to just get the highlights for you. Just say, here's the things you need to know. Here are the important things. So as you'll see from my report on the 2017 audited financials, first of all, this is the first year the state did not do the audit. They actually contracted this out to a private CPA firm, which is not unusual for entities where they really haven't had too many problems with over the years. So again, this is the first year that it did, the audit was performed by an outside CPA firm. The outside CPA firm does still need to give that to the state. They still have to take a look at a couple things and certify it, but it has now been certified by the state. So a couple things that I have attached to my reports on here are, the first thing is, if you look, you'll see where I've highlighted the independent auditor's report. And then the second page of that, I have starred the opinion. And I won't read that whole thing, but that is basically in the CPA world known as a clean opinion. Just basically says we think that these financials are in accordance with GAAP, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first thing, is the clean opinion. Then the auditor is also required to look at internal control of an organization. And while they're not certifying internal control, they're basically saying, as you can see here, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider material weaknesses. So that's always a good thing. And then you will also see that they also talk about the results of their tests on compliance. And again, you'll see where I've highlighted the results to disclose no instances of non-compliance or other material weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about as good as you can get. And the last thing is on management letter comments. There were no management letter comments. So again, it can't get too much better than that. Push comes to shove. The one thing I do like to point out in here every year to everybody is there's a lot of financial information in here. I know it gets very confusing, especially for non-accountants. But on page 3 through 11, they talk about management's discussion and analysis. So once again, I would always encourage you if all you do is take a look at 3 through 11, it'll really give you kind of a flavor of what management has had to say about the finances and things that are going on in the city that can impact that. So once again, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at that. The other thing I like to do once the audit is done is take a hard look at where we're at debt-wise. And so I always put this sheet in here for you, and I take this right off the audit report to kind of show you where we're at debt-wise. And so if you look at the left-hand column on the governmental activities, which is pretty much everything but water and sewer, you can see a great trend. Starting at the top in 13, we were about 3.6 of debt, and as you can see, that number is just slowly going down, 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 which is a great trend. So right now we're at about 2.5 million in governmental activities debt as of the end of 2017. In terms of the business type activities, which is water and sewer, once again, you see the anomaly in 2015 where it jumped up. Of course, that was the water line replacement, which is why I put the bond anticipation of water line issue on there, where we borrowed approximately $2.4 million for a special project. But again, from that point, you can see, once again, it's going down the last 2 years also. So again, good trend in terms of debt. Our general fund balance at December 31st was a little over $1.5 million, which again is very healthy. We typically see the bonding agency say they want to at least see 800,000 sitting there in that account. So it really helps us with our interest rates on our debt. So once again, we're very healthy there. That's pretty much it on the audit per se. The other thing I wanted to put in here this year, and I put something at everybody's table because this is what I got in my packet, which was not in color, which would not really help you guys too much. So I made some extra copies at the office and threw them on here for you guys. But this is something that the state does that is called, the state auditor's office does. It's called a financial health indicator. And I really like this thing because I think it's a great visual, especially for a council to be able to take a look at. This is the first year they've actually done it for Waterville because they typically require 7 years worth of financial trends. And the reason 7 is important is we weren't GAAP financial statements until we became a city at the end of in 2000. So we now have 7 years of GAAP statements where they can come up with some of their trends. So if you, and by the way, where you're in trouble, according to the state, is when you have 6 critical, so 6 red boxes, or a total of 8 red and yellow boxes. Right? That means you're in financial stress, you're in trouble. Right? You hear of that fiscal emergency that they have a lot of times with that. But you can see here with Waterville, we only have 2 yellow boxes, which is pretty darn good. Okay. I wanted to touch base just slightly, specifically on one of them, because I'll be honest, the number 1 yellow box, where that typically is you have a governmental fund that's declining. I can't find the governmental fund we have that's declining on our financial statements.
Oh.
So I don't know where they're coming from on it. It may be in some other way they're looking at the formula, but it's not something I'm super concerned about because our balances have been going up. But the thing I did put with this is on number 11, where we have a yellow box. That's basically where they say you potentially have capital asset replacements that are imminent. And what I attached on here is the notes to the financial statements. And you will see what I put on here is where they get into that is if your accumulated depreciation is 50 to 70% of your assets, then they're basically saying you're not putting money into your assets. Okay, so your buildings, your equipment are going down. They're depreciating faster than you are replenishing them. Okay, so if depreciation is greater than 70% or accumulated depreciation, you're red. That's critical. That means your stuff is really deteriorating. You're not putting the money into it to be able to do that. So what I highlighted here is you can see our total assets are about $34,450 in terms of land, buildings, furniture, streets, etc. And our accumulated depreciation's about 21 million. So you can see that says 61% of our assets are for GAAP purposes being being depreciated quite quickly. It really is evident in the streets. When you look at the streets and the street accumulated depreciation, that's almost 65%. So I just want to bring that up because obviously it's something that's in this financial health indicator. I know council has talked about this, especially when it comes to streets. So once again, the state auditor is showing this in something that's a very visual. We're certainly not red, we're not in critical condition or anything like that, but it certainly is an area that they have on their spreadsheet here to at least be looking out for. And I believe the audit will be approved at our next finance committee meeting, which I know is sometime in November, I believe. So with that,
That's interesting.
that's the end of my report.
I like that graph. On the streets, how do they quantify streets?
Good question.
To get that asset of
Good
28 million, and
I
how do
know-
they depreciate streets? Like, in our own business, we can depreciate accelerated or different ways.
Right.
And
If you look on the
do
next page,
accelerated? Okay.
next page that I put on, it talks about the depreciation method that's used for book purposes. And so
Where
you can
streets are
see it's a
15 to
straight line
40
method,
years.
and
Okay.
it defines the years of life that it gives to various things.
I was just trying to determine as we add streets versus, when your town gets bigger, you're adding, so that should be going up, and then.
Well, as you're adding those streets, I know they take the costs of what those streets are, add them in as assets, and then give them a useful life that they depreciate over time.
Right.
So,
What's the useful life of our streets, Steve? Are they using 15 years or 40 years?
well, they're saying anywhere between 15 and 40.
Who's deciding that?
I know when they started doing gap statements is when they came in and
Decided.
decided some of that. Yeah.
So it's sort
I
of
haven't seen the depreciation.
So it's sort of
schedule.
subjective,
It's very subjective.
15 to
absolutely.
40 years. So I guess
Absolutely.
as people like to talk about streets, no, we're not talking about anybody here. We need to keep in mind the accounting if you're not into depreciation and that, and how you pick the years and how you do it, okay? So don't go running out saying the streets are
$1 million.
bad, yeah.
Well, the example
But-
I'll use is I live on Canal Court. My house was built in '72.
Right.
I doubt much has been done to that road, and I'm not saying it has to be, but
Is it still fine?
it's still fine.
you're on a
Yeah,
court.
and even if it was 40 years, this would say it's fully depreciated, and it's not worth anything.
But you're not a through street such as
Understand.
Cedar, but I guess what I'm saying is council needs to understand that when they look at a street number, just FYI from the,
Yes,
Okay.
gap accounting is just estimates of how long something will
Yeah.
last. Some things will last longer, some things won't last as long.
because I always like them to understand the numbers so that you're not, as you're making decisions in the budget side, you understand where they're coming from here.
Absolutely.
What
So
I was-
don't be too alarmed about red and yellow here. I would be alarmed about red, but as far as a lot of it's in streets, just so they understand how it's done.
I was suggesting, Mayor, that if the range is 15 to 40 years on streets and 35 to 100 years on buildings, you could be anywhere between green and red, and it's more a function of what life they're using than it is the actual condition of your structure.
There's no question about it.
And how busy you are for your assets to be used. If you're in let's do New York City, and your stuff's going out every day, several times a day, its useful life is a little bit shorter. If you're in a smaller area where it's not used as much, I mean, that's just an opinion on usage of assets, but I am not the accountant.
Financial statements are not supposed to be exact, they're supposed to be
Yeah.
reasonable estimates.
And I don't say that to be offensive, I just wanna make sure council gets that but we're into budget season now, so everybody all right. I do like that information a lot.
I just think it's really good. It gives a snapshot you can look
We
at.
just went on this, right, because of
This,
GAP,
this was the first year because
so
of
this will be great,
72.
everybody going forward.
And, I just printed off the page that had us on it. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's every
It's
city
fun to
and
look at all
every
the-
county and the state.
And you
has
could
this.
compare to other sized towns and just
And-
kind of see what's going on.
And you can see we're in pretty good shape in comparison to a lot of other cities.
That was the point I was going to make, is check out the green on Waterville compared to, yeah.
I don't want to be alarmist with the two yellows. I'm just trying to
No,
say,
no.
hey, here's the thing they're telling us we should
I want
kind of look
everybody to
at.
take it with their grain of salt and then ask a lot of questions of the CPA to understand the numbers. So. Hey, that's great.
Yeah, that's
That is awesome. Any questions
No?
for Mr. Schultz?
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good news. All right, we have communication from council members, and I'll start with Mrs. Duncan.
The only thing I wanted to say was Roche de Boeuf seemed like a very successful day. I knew some people that lost their keys, and people that found them gave them to one of the policemen on the bicycles, and they got them back, and they were very pleased. So it just seemed like things worked really well on Saturday. Thanks to, Public Works and the police and fire, and the mayor did get dunked a number of times by the Boy
Anything
Scouts.
For the city, yeah.
I thought it was
Raising money
fabulous.
for the kids.
I recommend everyone on this,
Yes.
council do it at some point. It's for a good cause. That's all.
Thank you.
We'll do it right after you.
I think she was volunteering for 2019. All right.
No.
Mr. Pedro.
Same comments. It was great. I was telling somebody earlier, it's kind of fun to be here all these years and be involved in the planning and helping out a little bit. This year I sat on the sidelines with my grandchildren, and it was really a treat to see all the booths go by and the military vehicles and, of course, the fire and police and the band, the marching band. So that was good. So thanks to the committee for that. And then secondly, just a reminder to council and to citizens, if they're interested, this Thursday, 7:30 a.m. at the Browning Complex, we're going to have our fall roundtable economic development breakfast and lunch meeting, or breakfast and networking session. 7:30 to 8 is breakfast, and 8 to 9 the SBA will be a presentation on SBA by Rob Haskins of J.B. Morgan Chase. Should be exciting, so if you can make it, let me know or let Todd know. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Rosie.
Nothing, Your Honor, other than Roche de Boeuf was, I'll echo that
Thank you.
comment.
Mr. Fry.
I echo the same thing. Festival's very nice. It's always a good time, so well done.
Mrs. Bruno.
Same sentiments, and the chamber, they did a good
Yeah.
job, they're the ones that organize it, right? So,
Yes.
and all the volunteers, we know what a lot of effort that takes and commitment, so.
Mr. Bruno.
No report tonight?
All right. We do have one item, an appointment to the Tree Commission, and I would like to make